Welcome to episode 17. Check out what you can expect this week.
Your students will treat your videos the same way sometimes.
Yeah, and with less reverence.
With less reverence,
I doubt there's much reverence for our podcast.
No, probably not.
Be wary. When someone's selling you engagement tools or interactivity tools, it doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's going to be effective at what it's trying to do. And you need to know kind of what the deficit is in your classroom so you know which tool to pick to meet the need. Boom.
Right? Oh, man, I love it. Transition. Sometimes I forget what tool we're about to go into. Like, I space out for a second, and then I'm like, oh, I remember.
He's transitioning. Now I get it.
He's transitioning now. Why did he use the word puzzle?
It's Josh and it's Will back again for another week of the High Tech Podcast. Josh, you here with me?
Yep, I made it. I arrived.
He made it all the way from his desk.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's such a walk.
Tuesday is a office day, right?
Yeah, I'm in the office.
So you did drive home today.
So it was, yeah.
You had to go
I got
somewhere.
home a little while ago. You know, I grabbed some dinner. Yeah, it may have been something that rhymes with Chick-fil-A.
Huh, I wonder what rhymes with Chick-fil-A.
I don't know. Yeah.
Wonder whatever that could have been.
Not a sponsor, but great food. So if you're listening, we're here, Chick-fil-A.
I think that should be the High Tech Podcast hashtag, not a sponsor. Hashtag not a sponsor.
It's like, yeah, not a sponsor, but we're here if you want to, you know, we're fine with that. I like your chicken. I
can't not like their sandwich.
Yeah.
I just, it's so good.
It is. It's delicious.
And you know what? I've been wanting one for about a week and a half, and it just hasn't come up. But of course, Sunday,
yeah.
I wanted one.
It's always Sunday.
And then I was like, you know what? No, dang it, it's Sunday. So then I, slept, and I woke up on Monday, and I was like, father-in-law and I are gonna work on a project. This is gonna be great. Get some lunch. Ooh, maybe we can get some out. Ooh, Chick-fil-A. It's Monday. I could get Chick-fil-A.
Except
Memorial Day.
It's a holiday.
Done.
Yep.
Right there.
Yeah.
Back to
that
back.
Happens.
Back to back days. No Chick-fil-A for me.
See, you know why I never have that problem? I know the schedule. Internally, I think my body is synced with the schedule. Like, my body's just like, it's a Sunday. We don't want that. We know it's not there. But then when it's Tuesday, my body's like, bro,
Chick-fil-A it up.
Chick-fil-A is open. Yeah, okay. Well, enough about food.
We'll dig into our next favorite topic, right?
Yeah,
clothing.
Clothing. Let's talk about clothing. All the sponsors that we have from clothing.
Yeah, exactly.
We have none.
Hashtag not a sponsor.
Hashtag not a sponsor. I think that is a new thing for us.
This is my intro question this week. I was thinking it through, and I was like, you know what? This could be a dud. I've got a couple in mind. This could be a dud, but it could also be insightful and bring up some history. So, Josh, what is the most significant or the oldest piece of clothing in your wardrobe?
Significant or oldest? Okay. So I've got to put a disclaimer on here, okay? I don't really I don't have a lot of sentimental attachment to clothing. Okay. I gotta be honest. It's basically like, listen, guys, if you guys haven't seen me, okay, I'm a little bigger, okay? Like, let's just be honest, okay? So here's the deal. I don't get heavily attached to clothes. I get like whatever doesn't make me look like a moron, I'll wear it, okay? So,
What a quality.
Yeah, what a quality. But I'd probably say I've had like this one cardigan for a long time. It's like it's actually one I think Wes, our roommate, gave it to me. Like one day he was just like getting rid of it. He was like, I lost weight. Here, big person, take this.
That's horrible.
I'm just joking. He did not say that. But it's like, I don't know, it's comfortable. I like the look of it. Okay. It fits well. I've had it for a while, since like college. I still wear it, even though there's like buttons missing. Because like I like to wear my cardigans open. Perfect. I like to feel like I'm being confined by a straitjacket.
Is it missing like one button, or have you taken them all off at this point?
No, like 3. It's missing like 3, I think.
You should just take the rest off.
Yeah, I don't wear it for formal occasions, okay? I wear it if I want to look like, I don't know, like I just got up 2 hours ago and I wanted to be comfortable. That's when I wear it. How about you? How about you? Clothing?
Well, see,
sentimental attachment?
Contrary to Josh, almost everything I own has a sentimental value. This keyboard mouse pad on my desk, the first one I ever bought. It's like my most favorite.
That is so not true. I saw your desk.
It is the first one I've ever had, though. I've never had a keyboard mouse pad like this.
Oh, well, yeah, because you just got it like
right, but it's my first one. Like I'll never want to get rid of it. You know, like that's the emotional attachment I bring to things.
Disclaimer: I've been through 5 mouse pads in the last 4 weeks. I'm just kidding.
So, you know, like the shirt I'm wearing has a value to me. I have a martial arts uniform. I've got many of those. But the one thing, when I asked the question, the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, I'm very interested.
I have a shirt that I've had since I was 16. I still wear it.
Okay.
So, you know, there's those kinds of things. But no, there's not that. The thing that came to mind was my pair of
wait,
skinny jean purple pants.
Yeah.
Purple pants. Yeah,
it just like popped into my head right there as you started talking.
I've had these pants probably since I was 15 or 16. I have worn them to every heavy metal concert I've ever attended.
Ooh.
They fit the last time I put them on, which was before quarantine.
before you found Chick-fil-A, is that?
Yeah, I'm not gonna expect that they're gonna fit anymore. But it's like the pair of pants I wore on my first date with my wife.
Okay.
I've worn them to all my heavy metal and she married me. I wore them, and this is a family joke. I wore them the first time I met some of the cousins, and the one cousin, she's also married into the family, so you know, outsiders got to connect at some point. Yeah. But she said she saw me walk into the house wearing these pants, and she thought, "What dork is this girl dating? He is never gonna make it." Right, and that is over 10 years ago at this point, right? Yeah. That I came into the family, and she thought that about me. But that's funny. Sarah, you know, much love if you ever listen to this episode. But those pants, they're it. That's it. They've got stories. They've gone a lot of places with me. I've bled on them. You know,
you've been through life together. I will mention this. If I could pick jeans, Will, I totally would. The problem is, like how you have a relationship with jeans that have been through everything with you. I'm a serial killer. Okay, I've murdered so many jeans.
Serial killer asterisk towards jeans.
Towards jeans. Okay. I've gone through so many pairs of skinny jeans. Let's move on to a new topic. Let's not talk about that graveyard of things.
I've got one pair tucked away in a corner. Josh has a cemetery.
Oh yeah, no, they've ripped on many occasions in public and not public. Yeah, great stories. We'll ask that again some different time.
All right, so this week's actual conversation, digging into the juicy bits of education that Josh and I are constantly dealing with in our professional lives, and they just bleed over into our personal lives. This time it's coming back to some points about assessment. We have a whole episode on formative, summative assessment, kind of breaking into those areas. But this week we're kind of asking the question, how do we cultivate interactivity in assessments, right? Interactivity, engagement, these are very popular topics. If you go on any EdTech site, that's what they're trying to sell you.
Yeah.
Get your students to be more interactive.
There's a couple hot topic words, right? And right up at the top are interactive, engagement, assessment.
and each one of those words you see in the byline should tell you how many zeros to expect.
Yes, absolutely.
So Josh and I want to take a little bit of time in this conversation to first define assessment and set the expectation of what we're talking to. And this is actually going to be a two-parter. Some of these ideas we're going to lead into the next episode because we think this is just really important for two reasons. One, of course, to like better cultivate this in your classroom, be able to use these tools effectively, right? But two, like be wary. When someone's selling you engagement tools or interactivity tools, it doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's going to be effective at what it's trying to do. And you need to know kind of what the deficit is in your classroom so you know which tool to pick to meet the need.
Because a lot of them, like as we'll dig into this, I think, get at like the surface value or surface problems. They don't actually like deal with the real issues, or they're just like, they promise they're going to solve all your problems for you without careful thinking. And I think that's part of the problem.
Like every tool that's tried to make discussions better. If you Listen to my soapbox episode on discussion forums. It's not necessarily the tool that's going to make the difference, right? It's about how we design the assessment. So assessments, right? At the very core of them, we use assessments to help our students demonstrate their understanding of knowledge, their retention of knowledge, their ability to use that knowledge in new contexts in novel ways, right? So assessments are just a way to get feedback from our students. And usually there's a grade associated with it. You can do assessments like our episode about formative summative that have no grades to them. That's great. It can really teach you a lot and give you some feedback from the students. But you typically are using an assessment like a quiz, an exam, a project, a speech, etc., to get that summative grade from the students and know where they are on something at the moment you assess them. Now, we want to set that definition up because when we talk about interactivity, and one of our tool today is kind of a prime example of this in some of the better ways, right? But
yeah, absolutely.
When you talk about interactivity, that's simply enough getting you and your students to do something with each other, or the students to do something with each other, or a student to do something with your content, right? So student to content, student to student, or student to teacher. Those are 3 levels of interactions that can take place in an academic context. If I want the students to be doing interactions for assessment purposes, it's probably going to be interacting with each other or interacting with content, right? I can imagine, and actually I think of like some language classes I've helped work on where the interaction is between the instructor and the student, because the interaction is like a pronunciation assessment. That is the student talking to the instructor providing feedback or grading the pronunciation or the ability to hold a conversation in another language. Like that's a student to teacher. So it's not like you can't have interactivity for an assessment in the student to teacher relationship, but it's more commonly going to be, here, watch this video. Or here, during my lecture, make sure you're taking notes. Or here, like there's certain things that are happening in the normal classroom experiences where interactivity is like cultivated. But how do we do that well? That's kind of the question we want to beg today and dig into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like it's the idea of like in our space we're thinking in using technology, right, in that type of environment. How do you do interactive assessment well, right? Because we're high tech, like that's going to be our focus, right? So that's kind of where we're at, and I think the question is how do we do that well? How do we assess students? How do we take inventory of how they're doing, of what they're doing at that moment, and do it in a digital space or with technology? And I think there's a couple different ways, but when we're talking about, I think, interactive assessment, we're thinking about this idea of how do you put into the content or the things that you're doing, these ideas, having them interact in a way that is intentional to assess how they're doing, assess how they're learning, how they're processing, assess their understanding of something. And that can look a lot of different ways, right? But this is kind of what we're, I think, talking about, right? We're trying to figure out how do you do that well in the midst of, it can be a physical classroom online. Like how do you use technology to do that well?
Right. So, to kind of ground this in an example can be a little helpful. If you have the students watch a video, the goal of them watching that video is to gain knowledge on your subject matter. And you want them to take that knowledge and make it applicable. You want them to use it either in another assessment. You want them to be able to hold on to the terminology that was used or even draw from the concepts that were shared. So oftentimes we provide them that video as step 1. And then separately, step 2, we provide them maybe a worksheet to take some notes on it or nothing. It's like watch the video, read the textbook. Okay, at the end of the unit, there's a quiz that might have a couple of questions about the video, might have a couple of questions about the textbook. Like it's really separated. It's not like pulling together.
It's this idea of like even like if we do a quiz, I think I see what a lot of people do is like video, and then like quiz or like a video, they'll put a quiz in there. Or they'll do something in class and they'll have a quiz that the students will take afterwards. Like if we're not talking an online environment, I think, or do a worksheet, later that night. And there's nothing wrong with necessarily doing those things, I think. But when we think about interactive assessment, we're thinking about this idea of like, how do we take that and put that in the midst of what's actually going on? Like, how do we take that and do that more of in a chunked manner in the midst of what you're doing? So practical example, right? Let's just move to a technological space. Let's say online, right? Okay. I think would be interesting is instead of doing video quiz, right? Take that video, put it into a quiz, or even section out the video, and put it into different questions and things that they have. Break up the worksheet so the questions are being asked in the moments that the video are going through. You can do this in a lot of different ways. Like the tool we suggested today is a great example of this, but you can actually do interactive video. That's a thing. You can add questions and things into the timelines of videos. You need a specific tool to do that. So that may not be at your fingertips unless you're listening to our episode and have two guys who like to suggest tools. But
weird idea, right? Maybe that's why we're here.
I've seen people do this differently where they don't have the tools, but they can make a quiz. So they put the video into the quiz. Like it's literally, they watch the video. There's an essay question or multiple choice questions. And then they watch the next section of the video and there's questions. And the idea, right, in this, I think in interactive assessment here is that you're trying to get them to interact with what you're teaching so that you can kind of get a better idea, assess how they're processing the information, how they're understanding. A lot of times, I don't think it's always just about getting points and making sure they've got it perfectly right. You're also trying to just assess their interaction with your content, and in a way that keeps their attention, it pulls them in, and is gonna assess them in the moment that they're learning, right?
So here's some of the educational psychology of why, right? There is something to the point of time in the learning experience. Time is very important. In a behaviorist theory of learning, you would actually say that the more the students have time to repeat it over and over, if we can get repetitions of that knowledge. So they watch a video, the point of the video is that we should improve the search terms that we put into our website design to improve SEO, right? So improve search terms. That's the point of the video. Well, we should have them not only watch that video that says improve search terms, we should have them read this thing that says improve search terms. We should have them watch a video again that says improve search terms. And then we should take a quiz that quizzes them on the fact that they should improve search terms. Like that repetition is really important. We might also say that, if your lecture is focusing on it, you would kind of come back to that point after several, you might talk about a bunch of different things in your lecture, but you would almost always bring everything back to, we need to improve our search terms for SEO and web design. That's not the only way to do things. And one of the ways that we can improve this practice, while that is actually good on a behaviorist's side of the kind of theories, if we can put those questions in the context of what they're learning that drive them back to that point, it makes it all the more real that while they're learning their content, they're stopping and thinking about like, okay, so I listened to 5 minutes of video. I think it's about search terms. And then I get stopped on a question that asks me, what's the importance of this video? And you say, making better search terms. And then you continue on to another 5 minutes of the video, and it stops you and asks you a different question that still is trying to get you back to that point of it's about search terms. Instead of them having to have watched 3 videos or the video 3 times, or watch a video and read a supplementary lecture that's on the same thing, that video and asking them the questions in context helps to reinforce that knowledge and a proximity, right? It's I'm learning about it, I know the importance. I'm learning about it, I know the importance. And then I'm always like a more is more kind of guy when it comes to assessment. Like if I can give them the video and stop it every 5 minutes and ask them a question, or every 3 minutes, whatever it is, and then give them a quiz at the end of the lesson, all the better. Because if they can practice it now a couple of times, that's going to help reinforce the short-term memory, but we want to test them in the long-term memory as well. That when they come to it the next day, or when they come to it after a couple other different activities, that knowledge has really sunk in and they can recall it again after those better short-term practices, like the interactions in a video.
Yeah. Or, like, let's take this to a slightly different example here, right? Like, let's say you're teaching about let's go to a counseling realm, right? Like, say we're teaching them how to handle certain situations, or again, I'm not a counselor, so whatever my examples are giving to you are going to probably sound very either dumb or not great, so forgive me, not a counseling instructor. But like you're trying to teach them how to interact with people, deal with certain situations, right? So maybe you're reading a couple chapters, right? And some of the chapters are really focused on certain interactions, certain sections, or you've got a video or something that's interacting with them in a certain way. The point of this being is like what you could do, right? One way I see a lot of people deal with this, okay, read all of these sections and then you'll deal with this giant case study. Okay. Well, what if it looked like to actually say, read chapter 1 that's about, how to deal with grief or to deal with this. And then within chapter 1, say maybe have 1 or 2 questions afterwards where they're processing just a very small situation of dealing with grief and giving them choices, like giving them, this is where interaction can come in, right? Giving them a little bit of interactive choices to say like, and you can do this a couple different ways. You can do this a super high tech way of actually having like a great interactive quiz that like poses them scenarios and they answer how they would deal with that scenario by taking choices, or you can even do it in like a discussion where they're responding how they would deal with those choices, whatever that may be. Do that and build up to a bigger case study. So at the end of that week, maybe they've gotten through how to deal with grief and they've gotten through how to deal with this. And now they have a bigger case study where they have to deal with the complexities of those things together. But they can do it better because you've been assessing them throughout and dealing with the individual items, right? In an interactive way. Okay. So like this type of thing could work really well over the time. And that could look a lot of different ways. With, like I said, high tech, I'd love to do like, there's tools out there that do this. You can do this with simple quizzing tools, like scenarios, like choose this or this, right? Like, or do this or this. And they're low stakes, right? They just have to make a choice, but you're engaging them by thinking through. Like in a quiz tool, it's really easy for you to say, what would you do, option A or B? Okay, they pick option A. Well, maybe here are the repercussions of option A. Okay, and doing that throughout the time that they're reading the content, and they get to a giant case study where they're building the complexities of all of these things together. And that is a counseling example, but it could work in a lot of different places, from interpretation to reading to how you do that type of stuff.
I think that's great. Just between both of our examples, I think we're definitely showing those spaces for what interactivity looks like. And the goal, of course, is that we're just trying to get them to do something after taking content in, after watching. If they watch, they read, they listen, whatever it is, prompting them to do something is a mental exercise, right? Like we want them to stop, we want them to think it through, and we want them to reflect on it. The more times they have to do that, the more likely they are to retain the information over time.
Yeah.
And
or
actually
process
take things,
process it at a different level. And one thing I'll just throw in here, Will, because you made this comment before we started the episode, don't be afraid to add in this type of interactive assessment throughout your information, and some of it being low stakes, like some of it being stuff that's like having them being able to do it again, like over and over, like having some low stake questions in there that they might get graded on, but you know what, they can take it again, they can do it again. That bigger assessment, you may have more restrictions on how they deal with it, but those more low stake ones, have those in there so the student has the freedom to get into it, to make choices, to pick options, to kind of use it for what it's meant to be there, which is this idea of them also being able to assess how they're learning, along the way, and building confidence.
Well, this is a really dense topic. It's kind of, we very intentionally wanted to make sure that this had a follow-up in the next episode, because we wanted to break it up, because engagement is another element of this, right? Interactivity leads to engagement, and we think that there's something that's important in engagement that takes place during assessments, that takes place during lectures, etc. But we want to make sure that you kind of have space for this. Now, it's a pretty big puzzle, and it takes a lot of pieces to bring this puzzle together. That's why this week we want to make sure you have a tool that will help fit into your educational puzzle. That is
EdPuzzle.
Boom.
Right? Oh man, I love it. It transitions. Sometimes I forget what tool we're about to go into. Like I space out for a second, and then I'm like, oh, I remember.
He's transitioning now. I get it.
He's transitioning now. Why did he use the word puzzle? Yeah. So let's talk about the app, right? Okay. So EdPuzzle. Okay. Now there's a lot of tools out there that can do what EdPuzzle does, but I really like EdPuzzle. So let's talk about for a second what it is. So EdPuzzle is an interactive video tool. Okay. That's how I would probably define it at its core. It does some other things It integrates with a bunch of stuff, but if it's at its core, it's this idea of being able to take videos like Will and I were talking about and actually put the questions or items in the video. Okay, so that it actually stops the video while they're playing. It's in the video. The students don't have to go somewhere else to do this. You don't have to break your video up. You can literally just place it into the video itself. Yeah. These questions. That's what I love about EdPuzzle. It's pretty simple. Now, there's a couple different things you can do with it. I wrote some of these down, but what I love, they've got some question types. So they've got multiple choice, open-ended questions. So you can ask like a question, they can write a short text response, no large papers. Okay. And then they add in what they call like text options, but I would call a call out option as well. So it's this idea that you can just put something in the video. It doesn't have to be a question. It could be like a statement or a call to action. I usually like using these at like the end of a video for like a call to action to go to something or do something out of that video. They can add those options in. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I will be honest, I've only used it a little bit because we have another tool at our institution that does this type of thing, so we don't have to use EdPuzzle. I love EdPuzzle. It's great. It's just we have one that kind of came with our LMS that we adopted. But it does the same thing. We love to do this, like longer lectures or videos. We love to throw in just kind of like short questions, multiple choice, maybe an essay to just kind of like check in on the student, how they're doing. This is great for tracking retention through the video. Like it's and it's good. Just like, it's so easy to like zone out in a video. So sometimes it's great to kind of catch them and try to and ask a question, make sure they're thinking about something that was placed there.
Yeah, I don't try to be too policey about it. I know Josh doesn't either, but I just want to address that kind of language. Like, there's something to the fact that when you have a 15, 20, 30, 45-minute video, which against all better recommendations still exist in online education, you hit play and you zone out. You hit play and you take a phone call. You hit play and you get a text. You hit play and somebody knocks on the door, right? Like, it doesn't matter what real life happens. We know real life happens. And so having those stop points in the video is really important, just to make sure that the folks who need to learn something from it get the chance to do so. And they're not, and regardless of any distractions, it'll stop the video. If it asks a question they don't know and they don't know the answer to it, they can replay and listen back up to that point, right? So they can get the information again.
Yeah. And if you don't believe this is necessary, just one comment. How many of you listening to this episode started doing something else while listening to this episode? Okay.
I mean, isn't that the point of podcasts?
Yeah. Like, okay. So, your students will treat your videos the same way sometimes.
Yeah. And with less reverence.
With less reverence,
I doubt there's much reverence for our podcast.
No, probably not.
No, so the point stands that using these kinds of tools, like Josh has a different one in his institution, I have a different one in my institution. We've both used and heard of EdPuzzle outside of our institutions. It's becoming a really popular field. And that's why we did want to address the interactivity stuff in the conversation first, because it's not that EdPuzzle is going to solve your interaction issues or bring up your assessment grades, right? Just because you start putting questions into your lecture videos using EdPuzzle doesn't mean that interaction issues and grade issues are going to be resolved. However, you can use a tool like this to begin measuring that level of interaction and tracking it. And I don't like to be policey, but it is really helpful to know if you made a 30-minute video and your students gave up at minute 13.
That never happens.
That's information for you to help improve your practice and to consider, maybe I should bring my videos down to 15 minutes. If you have a 45-minute video that you created, I know all 45 minutes are important, right? But giving them the 45-minute video may not be the best vehicle for your important information. If we could do 3 15-minute chunks, you might get your students better through it. Or give them a 45-minute video, but ask them consistent questions throughout it so that they can get through each section. You ask a question and reinforce what's so important about that section, then they continue on. It takes a lot of time. It takes us a lot of time because to add those questions, you pretty much have to watch it back in live time and know what you want to ask. But
yeah, absolutely. And
really
to the point there, it doesn't have to be all about just like policing, do they watch the video? It's about knowing and assessing how they're processing the information that you have in the video. And that's what I like about like an EdPuzzle. Like, I think, just pose this question, right, guys? Okay, maybe you have a lecture, maybe you have something you're using. What would it look like to throw it in a tool like EdPuzzle, right? And maybe you're explaining a situation, you're working through some logic, you're go back to my counseling example, you're explaining how to counsel or use something like that, and all of a sudden the video stops at a pause point and brings up a question. Okay, hey, I just talked about dealing with grief. What would you do if this person brought this to you? And give them a couple questions in the video, right? So it's back to my example earlier, but in an EdPuzzle, you can actually place that inside the video itself and have them answer that question the second after you just talked about it, okay? And the point about this being is, in a classroom, you might actually do that. You might actually stop and ask them that question. In a video, you don't always get the opportunity to do that. And so, like, that's where I like what EdPuzzle presents, is an option for something like that, to throw those types in. And that's why an EdPuzzle is not going to solve all your problems, because you can also put in a lame question that does nothing to actually assess if they understand something.
Not that anyone would ever write a lame question.
Not that anyone would ever do
them,
that. Like,
Josh has written them. It's fine.
Somebody throws in a question that says, "Are you watching my video?"
Sometimes that's helpful. Maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll take that back. But in general, I think that's just great. Now, real quick, I want to talk about just EdPuzzle pricing, because this is part of the reason I suggest EdPuzzle, because Will and I's institutions both have options, but they're not the cheapest. We got them for different reasons at our institution. So what I like about EdPuzzle is EdPuzzle does have a free basic plan that you can use, because here at High Tech, we like free sometimes. So, and with that, you can do a good bit. There's just a little bit of a limit on how many videos you're allowed to have in there. You're only allowed to have like 20 videos in the tool. Now, it does integrate with LMSs, but the free version won't do that. It integrates with like Canvas and Google Classroom and a whole bunch of other stuff. But then like per month, just for your individual use to get unlimited storage, it's only $11.50 a month, which is not bad for what you can do. And then they have bigger stuff. But that's why I like EdPuzzle. I think it's a good priced tool, and it's fairly reliable from what I've used up. So, yeah, it's a solid tool.
Cool.
And recommend go check it out.
Now, accessibility-wise, you're using a video. So,
yes,
you immediately have an accessibility challenge. I haven't checked up on EdPuzzles specifically, but I know that the things you'd want to watch for here, if you had any questions where you'd want to ask them about an image or a screenshot or something, right? Like you're already introducing potential accessibility risks there. And normally with EdPuzzle, people are using YouTube videos. And if it's a YouTube video that you don't own, you can't be in control of the transcript and the subtitles. So there's some things that are definitely going to come up with accessibility purposes that you can address, right? You could get that YouTube video captioned. You could, if it's your own video, you can just make sure you have a script. Like, there's certain things to address in that space. And then if you're writing these questions, this is actually something I will say is a best practice, a big tip from an instructional designer who's been burnt several times on this. Keep your questions in a separate Word document.
Yep.
Write them down somewhere first and then put them in the quiz. Keep that file in a folder somewhere that's titled the course you're using it in, because when you go back to work on it and you've lost the questions, if they accidentally get deleted, if somebody else deletes the video because you weren't there, anything can happen. So write those questions down in a Word document, because if it came to an accessibility accommodation, you can provide the script of the video you recorded with the questions separately. Boom, you have something that meets the need immediately. You can address the accommodation, or the accessibility improvements at a later time, so that the student you're working with is supported. Beyond that, it's modern code, modern website. So I'm hoping that they're overall going to operate pretty well with a screen reader, that a student could navigate it if somebody was hard of sight or had a sight deficit. But, your number one when doing any sort of video media content for accessibility proofing your content is to make sure you have a script and have your questions written down. That's going to save you so much headache in the long run in supporting all of our students.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So with that, go check the tool out. It is a cool tool. We'll check out our resource page with some information about just jumping into it and how to take a look at it. And you can upload your own videos. You can do YouTube videos. whatever you'd like to put in there, you have those options for you. So thank you again, guys, for joining us for another episode of the High Tech Podcast. Talk about harnessing that tech in our classrooms, in virtual, in the sky. I don't know. I was throwing in other options. I got nothing. It's great. We'll end the episode there. See you guys.
See ya.